we need to do is we need to just walk away from all the cell biology. Really what we need to do is look at the big population studies. And the big population studies, it is very clear. All-cause mortality is higher in those individuals that spend less time in the sunlight than those that spend a lot of time in sunlight. We've really got it wrong. You know, if you just look at the bigger picture, you need sunlight. We've got the science. We know that light in the built environment, your LEDs are doing you no favours. If we give you some longer wavelength light, we change the LED, giving you that infrared, your grip strength improves. So it is truly an issue of public health. It's an issue about how we reintroduce bright lighting for public health.
Welcome to Sunlight Matters, the podcast that reconnects us with the sun. Join us as we explore the power and influence of our star, the force at the heart of everything. Each episode, we speak with leading experts to uncover the ways sunlight shapes our world.
So thank you so much. Really honoured to have you. It is a Friday, so I promise to be very gentle with you. And you. Also, I've just got back from Finland where I did a big swim down a river. So I know we're here to talk about the sun rather than the rivers. But, you know, one of the things that I did experience was 22 hours of sunlight, which was quite an amazing experience, actually. So I came back feeling truly sun-blessed from that. But so if I go off at a tangent, it's because my brain's still in the middle of a river in Finland somewhere.
It's fun.
Anyway, well, welcome to the podcast, Professor Glen Jeffery. Do you like Professor or you know?
No, I can't stand it. Just call me Glenn, please.
Okay, well, welcome to the podcast. I'm really, truly honoured to have you. Just for those who may not know who you are and what you do, could you give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, my name's Glen Jeffery. I am Professor of Neuroscience at University College London. I'm the Institute of Ophthalmology, which kind of implies eyes, but I'm really interested in light and what light does to the body, and little things that we have in all our cells called mitochondria that regulate our metabolism and regulate loads of other things, regulate the pace of our aging, etc. And I'm interested in how light interacts with those fundamental processes. That's kind of roughly where I am.
So because I think it's fair to say that you are one of the leading lights, and excuse the pun, in terms of research around sunlight and sunlight's impact on the body. Can I ask, where did that sort of interest kind of stem from?
It's quite kind of, I wouldn't say random, but someone sent me, when you're an academic, very often people send you papers to review. Publishers really are quite naughty because they expect you to do it for nothing and they pile them all up, and most of the time you say no. And then I saw one from a group of people that I vaguely knew, and it was on how long wavelength light, deep red light, improved outcomes in brain damage in animals, and I just didn't get it. But I knew these people and I knew that their science was very solid. And I think that, you know, that started the ball rolling. What's this interaction between light and the body other than, you know, the eye? It didn't have anything to do with the eye. So, you know, the body's responding to light, in this case in response to damage, and the outcome's good. So question is, what type of light? What's receiving this light? What is the mechanism going on? And that started the ball rolling. And God, you know, probably about 10 to 15 years ago.
I mean, even 10 to 15 years ago, that sort of feels like relatively recent. It's kind of fair to say that a lot of the research around the sort of topic is actually quite new, isn't it?
It is. It's snowballed. Certainly 5 years ago, I walked into clinical environments or scientific environments and, you know, made certain statements, and I wasn't taken very seriously. That has completely changed. You know, the traction is is there. We find, let's refer to, say, brain damage. I'm talking to critical care consultants in major hospitals about whether they need to think about their lighting. The whole thing has changed. Sadly, at the same time, there's been a commercial latch on. I mean, anyone who goes on the web and puts in red light, you're going to find vast numbers of companies asking for your credit card number, selling you fundamentally quite dodgy devices. So as we move forward, we're getting traction, but there's also a lot of drag on this, which is coming from commercial entities that are pushing the concept and eroding the traction that we get. I mean, we're winning, there's no question about that, but it is annoying.
Well, look, I think one of the great things is the universities, people like yourself. There's other people all around the world who are really looking at the subject. And I mean, you talk about mitochondrial function and how important that is, and it sort of feels that that's really being elevated as something that is of massive interest. But I mean, you've done some recent studies, haven't you, which kind of show just how impactful infrared light is. So, I think you did a study on kind of glucose metabolism, which was fascinating, and then one more recently, which I wonder if you could kind of talk about as well.
So the glucose metabolism, as we've moved on in life, people very often don't grab how scientists tick. They don't tick the way people think they tick. We tick rather randomly. So my first drive in life was to find a mechanism, because unless you have a mechanism, people don't believe what you're doing. So one angle on that was mitochondria, to function properly, need lots of glucose and they need lots of oxygen. So we did standard blood glucose tolerance tests, which is what you do sometimes with your GP or when you go to the hospital. So we load people up with glucose, and then we give them red light. The red light stimulates the mitochondria. The mitochondria grab the glucose out of your serum, and consequently your blood glucose levels go down. Likewise, your oxygen consumption goes up because mitochondria need glucose and oxygen. All right, that's absolutely fine. So the transition has been for us from some animal work that includes flies and bees through to some basic work on human physiology. And now I'm delving much deeper into the translational aspect. So what can we now say? I don't want to do any more. I don't want to kind of do anything else on mice. I don't want to do anything on cells in dishes. It's too far from the real world. So the playing field now for me is an area dominated by lighting engineers, by architects, etc. So 2 recent studies, one published, one just about to be published, showing firstly that daylight, sunlight, goes through your body. Right, those long wavelengths that we can't see, the infrared, we can detect them coming out of the other side of your chest if I just stand you in sunlight. And that impacts systemically on the body and can improve your visual function the following day. So now we're not talking about lights in laboratories in tightly controlled experiments. We're talking about you in sunlight and your vision. So the next stage on from that, and I think this is one that I'm really pleased with, is we move into an environment without windows, a working environment at University College London, mainly occupied by engineers and model makers, people that make architectural models. And they've all got horrible LED lighting. Now that lighting really undermines mitochondria. They really don't like it. And the consequence is there's a slowing of metabolism. We moved into that environment and we just took incandescent light bulbs. The old light bulbs you used to have, which are now becoming more difficult to find, when you switch them on, they got super hot. Okay, so we got rid of them because they were super hot, and so they were wasting energy, not producing light, but producing heat. So we reintroduced those into that environment and we got a fantastic result. Absolutely, everyone's vision improved, and it improved significantly. So, if you think about me as a sort of a scientist stumbling through the world, there I was doing stuff on cells in dishes, then I was doing stuff with flies and bees and mice, all getting the same result, highly conserved mechanism, and then moving on to humans, bringing humans into the lab and doing things to them. And then finally, I think, the latter stage of my career is really a latter stage where I'm saying, look, I'm in public health. This is a public health issue. We've got the science. We know the science is there. We know that light in the built environment, your LEDs, are doing you no favours. Now, I'm doing this. I'm not the only one doing it. I mean, there's a great lab at Westminster University that are just showing if we give you some longer wavelength light, we change the LED. We put something in the LED which is giving you that infrared. Your grip strength improves. Now that's really important. Okay, so it's not just Glenn playing around with vision, right? Now we've got people who are saying this general effect on metabolism is actually impacting on your motor skills, your grip strength. Really simple to do. Great experiment, really well done. So it is truly an issue of, for me, public health. It's an issue about how we reintroduce bright lighting for public health, and particularly, let's pick up the place where we need it most, first of all, which is nursing homes with older people, clinical environments. I got an email last Friday from NICE, which runs, they look at sort of introduction of new techniques, new drugs, asking about red light. We got traction. I can see the retirement door very comfortably in front of me with that kind of request.
To be honest with you, I can see the retirement door slamming very firmly in your face, because it sounds like you've just got started. Can I look? Just rewind slightly, because I sort of feel there was so much in what you said. And I'm thinking about the context of we're spending more and more time indoors. Like, I think it's the average person is spending 90% of their lives indoors, mostly under LED light. So the fact that light can impact metabolism, I mean, and I presume metabolism is just one of the many functions. As you say, you've then looked at eyes, and that really makes me sort of think that this is potentially a real public health crisis that is, we've got to kind of get to the bottom of. So many of what I guess we suffer from in terms of modern diseases may actually be to do with light. Is that too overstating things too much?
Well, I try to understate as much as I possibly can, particularly to take me away from all the commercial entities. But you're right. So much of your life is regulated by mitochondria, right? Your body temperature is there because mitochondria are burning glucose. Mitochondria suffer either primarily or secondarily as a consequence of disease. So, okay, some diseases are primarily mitochondrial. Parkinson's is a classic. We think macular degeneration is also another one. But as you age, your mitochondria just start to pack up, right? So they produce petrol called ATP. Now that ATP can go down by 70% with aging. So the whole system is starting to become frail, and then it only takes a small knock and the pack of cards goes over, right? So if we can bolster the ATP, if we can bolster the mitochondria through the difficult phases of aging, and we have an aging population, I don't know if it's true, someone told me, that I think they did know what they were talking about, that in Japan now they're selling more diapers for old age pensioners than they are for babies. That could be untrue, I don't know, but I like the story. The demographics of Western civilization are changing enormously. We're ending up with a large number of old people who are unhappy because they can't do things they want to do. They are, let's say this in a kind way, a social burden in terms of cost. So that there's a real imperative, not only from a humanitarian point of view, to change this, but from a societal angle as well. So, and it's cheap. All we need to do is change the lighting.
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Because I guess there's the other thing that is going on at the moment, which is this rush to net zero, which is why LED lights have kind of gone into offices and homes. And, I'm a firm believer in the law of unforeseen consequences. And it seems that,
Yeah.
for the net zero kind of movement, that seems to have played out very nicely in this, that the sort of social aspects of lighting have kind of been forgotten about. And, it's really interesting about the incandescent bulbs, because it happens that, I've got a couple of lights with incandescent bulbs on in my house, and they're the ones I always gravitate towards. I've got a real fire in my house. I've always wondered, why do I love my real fire so much? It's kind of fascinating that, like, within us is this connection. That connection is kind of being lost. And so I guess one of the questions around lighting is how do you kind of address it? Because I guess if NICE are coming in, so they are the how would you describe them? Just because there's listeners who are from other countries here. What's the best way of describing them?
Agency that regulates the administration of new drugs into the market or new techniques for healthcare. So they say, A, it's too expensive, or B, it doesn't work. Okay? So they're not going to win on the too expensive argument now, and I don't think they're going to win on the it doesn't work anymore.
But if they come in and they endorse kind of red light, and one wonders then what happens. So policy has to change, I guess, not just in this country but all around the world, in terms of taking all of these things into account. Because if you play forward, like, we're spending more time indoors, we've got LED lights, there is perhaps an even worse health crisis waiting for us a bit further down the line, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, that is definitely the case. But of course, governments don't necessarily engage with this, because if it's further down the line, their attitude is, it's not going to be our problem. Certainly in the case of the British government, I've heard people say, their major concern is the headline tomorrow, not the long view.
Yeah, well,
so
I've seen that for myself on the river stuff. So yeah,
exactly. Pollution in rivers, etc. So it's a time bomb and it's ticking. And I mean, one point I would make about this, and I'll keep hammering it because it's the point that I think sticks to the wall with the people with power. It's really cheap. So let me give you an example. One of our graduate students was doing an experiment with different light bulbs, and he gave all these people these really horrible LED light bulbs. I think we could put 5 in an office, and we're expecting everyone to have their vision absolutely hammered by this. And he mistakenly put one bulb in there that actually had a long wavelength LED put in it. It had infrared. We got the data back. Everybody improved. Of course, we all went spare. What's going on? And of course, in the end, we just found out that someone had just made a simple mistake. But that's telling you something. It's telling you don't need much infrared light to improve the situation. Okay, that one bulb that was actually adding infrared light to this office environment with, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 people sitting in it, had an effect on everybody. Now, long wavelength light, that deep infrared light, bounces all over the place. We can't see it, but it's bouncing everywhere. And it's got relatively few natural absorbers. Okay, so plants just just reflect infrared and scatter it absolutely everywhere. So a small bulb in an environment can have a big effect, right? And remember, when they all tell you can't get incandescent bulbs, remember you can't put an LED in an oven, right? It melts. So you've got to have incandescent bulbs somewhere, right?
To be clear, Glenn is not saying stick your head in an oven.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. So, yeah, I think I've told everybody that we're all working together, on this kind of area. Just keep telling people it's cheap, and the consequences for public health, I believe, will be significant.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I mean, what that in itself, I'm like flabbergasted by. I think Bob Fosbury, who is one of your collaborators, he talks about human beings or anything alive being like an antenna for the sun, which I absolutely love as a kind of concept. But it sounds like that antennae is so well tuned to kind of accepting these rays that even small amounts can make a massive difference.
They can. Bob is great. Because Bob's an astronomer, so he walks into our environment, he sees things differently, and he says things in a different way. That's a fantastic collaboration. But, Bob walked into the room and said, what we're in is an environment where we've got infrared starvation. And the medical profession are not used to the notion of something being taken away and your health suffering. So he came out with the phrase that our current situation is analogous to scurvy.
Yes.
In scurvy, people got sick and died because they didn't have something. They didn't have vitamin C and fruit. And that is so you take these people, you put them in a strange environment on a boat, and they go out to sea and they're missing something and they get a disease. We as a population have evolved such that we're going into a strange environment. We sit in buildings for vast amounts of time with infrared blocking glass on our windows, and we get sick. We get sick in subtle ways, and those are public health issues. I wish I remember who said it, but I was listening to Radio 4 at about 8:30 in the morning. And of course, you're making coffee, you're doing all these things. You've got one ear on the radio just to find out if someone's dropped an atom bomb. They were talking to a head of public health. It was either in Birmingham, Manchester, somewhere like that. And he said, there's something going on in the office environment that's undermining health, and I don't know what it is. Now, about a week later, we're all sitting around having coffee, and someone said, do you remember that? And we all went, oh, God, wasn't that? But it was too late. We'd all forgotten who he was, and we couldn't find out.
Wow.
But a public health person said there's something wrong with the office environment. And if that person ever listens to this podcast, I want him to ring me.
No, well, we need to get the message out. I mean, I love the analogy with scurvy. But there is a warning, isn't there? Because scurvy, they kind of knew what was going on, but it took 100 years, I think, before they really kind of looked to sort of make sure there was vitamin C going onto boats. And I think it feels like this is a really urgent thing that, if we don't get changes in terms of lighting, then, our populations, as they get older, like, going into care, people are going to get sicker and sicker. And the burden on the health service of, us as a population, and that, I guess, is not just in the UK, but all around the world of aging populations, is huge. So actually, if there is a cheap way of kind of improving people's outcomes and their, grip strength is amazing, because grip strength is a real indicator of like how healthy somebody is, isn't it? So improving all of these outcomes just is vital.
Yeah, I think that what we need to do is we need to just walk away from all the cell biology. Really what we need to do is look at the big population studies. And the big population studies, it is very clear. All-cause mortality is higher in those individuals that spend less time in sunlight than those that spend a lot of time in sunlight. all-cause mortality in the Northern Hemisphere peaks just after Christmas. All-cause mortality in the Southern Hemisphere peaks just at the end of June. That's the best control ever, right? And there's a fantastic dermatologist, Richard Weller in Edinburgh, who has come back. Now he's a dermatologist, you know, you'd think he'd be panicking about sunlight. And he's saying, hang on, we got it wrong. We've really got it wrong. You know, if you just look at the bigger picture, you need sunlight. And he, you know, his article on this, I think it said, have we got it wrong or something? His article on this was great. You know, it had all those little snippets. You think, oh yeah, oh yeah. So if people that get skin cancer, they've been out in the sun, therefore they should have very high vitamin D levels. They've been in the sun. Sunlight regulates vitamin D. Opposite. In actual fact, they've got very low levels of vitamin D. So we've got causation and outcomes here the wrong way round. And what we need to do is we need to look at big population data to get a handle on it. Blood sugar control is much better in people that spend a lot of time in sunlight. And the studies that have done that have been across Europe, and they've had tens of thousands of people in them. Okay, so you can't say this doesn't work because it didn't work in my aunt. You know, you need to look at big population studies.
Which is why we need academics to be really driving a lot of this forward.
Well, I think some academics, you don't want them driving anything forward. You want to lock them away. But you do need a big picture to understand what's going on. You know, don't say I did this experiment in a dish with cells and nothing happened. You need to look at the human, you need to look in big picture, and you need to look at the concept of aging, because with us, we're not supposed to live really beyond 35 or 40. We're pushing all these people, average lifespans 82, 83. We have a vulnerability which is completely novel in terms of our evolution, right? Really novel. I think an incandescent light bulb out of an oven may represent a form of protection for many. I'll take qualifications as I can.
Yeah, well, look, I'm going to go straight on to Amazon after this and buy a few incandescent light bulbs. Like, you know, and it's a very real thing for me, because I think about one of my sons. He is the archetypal gamer who went into his room in COVID and never really came out. And I'm like, you know, look at him and think, gosh, you know, what's going to happen to you? So, like, the thought that actually if I could get an incandescent light bulb into his room, it's probably not as optimal as the sun, you know, in terms of kind of his health. But at least it's something, isn't it?
It is, and if it, you know, in the cases where you could say, well, look, you know, maybe it didn't work for my son. The point is, if we took 1,000 people, it would work, right? Because there's noise in humans. You know, if you take, I still occasionally work on things like fruit flies. You work on fruit flies because I can get thousands of them in a study, and I do things like how long do they live. Okay, so fruit flies live longer when there's an incandescent light bulb than rather with an LED. You've got to look at large numbers, right? Humans are messy. Fruit flies are all exactly the same, pretty much, males and females. You know, if you look at, say for instance, you look at my two kids, their lifestyles are radically different. I mean, they're both fairly healthy, but radically different. So if I did something to them, I'd expect noise in the data. Looking at small numbers at individual humans is problematic. You need to look at big numbers. And I've fallen foul of that as well, because sometimes I find it very difficult to get my hands on subjects. So I look at big population data and I let that guide me for the sorts of experiments I might do with smaller groups of people.
So I mean, fascinating. And if you ever need a subject, I'm here, and I'm sure I can rustle up many more as well. But I mean, what are some of the other things that you'd like to have a look at?
I think so we're reaching a point where what we want to do other key metrics in aging. So Another really key metric in aging, super simple. How long can you stand on one foot with your eyes closed? Right? So that is a motor skill. It's a balance skill. It's got a lot in it. So a lot of stuff packed into that. I want to start looking at different metrics. Ultimately, I want to know how we can influence the clinical environment. And we know that people who have beds next to windows in hospitals tend to be discharged earlier than people that are sitting a long way from a window. Now, I didn't know that, but the consultants in critical care told me that. Oh yeah, we all know that. Christ, let's change the windows. You know, where I want to be and what I want to do before I walk through that door it's all around public health. Right? It's public health. And we've got there to some extent. We're talking a lot to architects, a lot to lighting engineers, and they're grabbing hold of it a lot quicker than the medics did. They're a lot closer to it, but you know, they've got phrases like well-being, which I love. Well-being, I don't know what it means, but well-being going up is clearly good, and well-being going down is bad. And they've got the idea of daylight and well-being. Fine, I'll back that package firmly.
I mean, the other thing I'm struck by is, you know, when we first chatted, you said the other really easy thing to do is to go and spend 20 or 30 minutes outside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, and like I've been reading some of the, I think it's Roger I can never say it.
Welts.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a killer.
Dyslexic, right. But Roger's sort of stories around people who are very ill going into sunlight and, you know, getting dramatically improved by just sort of spending time outside. And, you know, I guess that's kind of a good indicator for, you know, the rest of us, actually, if we could just spend a bit more time outside. It sounds like we don't need to do a lot based on your incandescent bulb thing.
No, in fact, you know, I'd say to you, if you've got a reasonable lifestyle, don't under any circumstances buy any red light device that you see on Amazon. Don't go near them, right, unless you have a specific reason to go near them. So, you know, you've got a vision problem or something. But if you change your view of the world, we can't see infrared, but if you take a camera and use infrared, all the plants around you are screaming at you. They're reflecting all that infrared light, like you've got behind you.
Yeah.
Now, go grab a leaf in strong sunlight and then put your other hand on a brick wall. The brick wall is warm, the leaf is cold. The wall is absorbing infrared, the leaf is reflecting infrared. Now when I go with my instruments and I go up to a leaf, the reflection of the infrared light is very close at one moment in time to a therapeutic dose, to something that improves physiological function. But of course you go for a walk in the park for half an hour, right? So change your lifestyle. Go for a walk in the park. Bob Fosbury, Bob loves Spectra and he loves toys, and he likes expensive toys as well. So I was with him a couple of weekends ago, and he just took his device, his spectrometer, which measures infrared light, and we put it under a fern in his garden. And there was almost no visible light. It was very, very dark under the fern. But the infrared light, I mean, it wasn't, you know, a few times greater. It was log units. It's times 10, times 100 greater under that plant. So there's this world out there of infrared light that we don't see. You know, I don't think there's any animal that I'm aware of that really extensively sees infrared light. So it's out there, it's having a profound effect on in physiology. Go on the web, type in infrared photograph, okay? And do it and look at a tree. It looks as if it's been snowing.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
So don't spend your money. Go for a walk in the park. You benefit in two ways. One is you'll get loads of infrared light, and secondly, you'll be doing some exercise, which your mitochondria love anyway.
I mean, it's fascinating. And again, it's like we're talking a no-money solution, aren't we?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
you know, I think this is sort of like actually understanding that nature-based things can really be the most effective is kind of wonderful to hear. But I read this brilliant article, I listened to this brilliant interview by one of the doctors who writes for Private Eye magazine. And this was a few years ago, and he said that the public health crisis in the UK would be solved if we all had a dog. And, you know, and obviously, you know, dogs aren't suitable for everybody, but his sentiment was very much about, you know, dogs get you out, don't they? Like,
They do. So, you know, a double whammy in the sense of going for a walk in the park. You're getting exercise your mitochondria like, you're being surrounded by infrared light that your mitochondria like. Both of them are going to have a really positive effect on your blood sugars. What's one of our major crises that we've got in front of us? We've got a diabetic crisis in not just old age, we've got a diabetic crisis, but it gets worse as you get older because you've got less control over your insulin levels. So, yeah, it's really simple. It's really simple. It was quite heartwarming. You know, I'm a cyclist. I've always been a cyclist. And after COVID, the gentle kind of expansion of cycling in London has been very noticeable. I was cycling down the Holloway Road 10 years ago on my own, you know, breathing in all that crap. And it's different now. People, you know, cyclists are all piling up, and we're breathing less crap because half the buses are now electric. So exercise, super important.
yeah, no, I love the gentle expansion of cycling in London. Having done it, I was like, there's nothing gentle about it.
No, okay.
The Tour de France every day. But no, I think I get your point. And, you know, actually, you look at London and, you know, I know there's a lot of anti-Eulers stuff, but actually, you know, air is really critically important as well, isn't it? You know,
Yeah, I sold my diesel car and got whatever it was, the 2,000 quid for it, and I felt free as a consequence. You know, this is sort of slightly anecdotal, but we were doing some work some way away with a colleague, and he dropped me off in London before going off home, and he dropped me off on the North Circular. As I got off, I ran my hand along a railing, a pedestrian railing, and it was just black. You know, and all circular was, you know, packed.
Yeah, no,
and I thought, oh my God, this is in my lungs. So, yeah, there's a whole load of stuff about public health. There's a whole load of stuff that we need to readdress because of an industrialised society. Public health is not the same issue as it was in 1850, you know, and public health is not the same as it was in 1950. We have to change what we're looking at and the questions we're asking. But they, you know, outcomes don't have to be super complicated.
No, I think that is such a wonderful message. Well, listen, we're sort of out of time. I mean, I genuinely love to carry on chatting, but you know, I think we could perhaps have a follow up at some point.
Yeah, absolutely sure. But you know, I'm always here. I do my best. You know, I've said this on multiple times. I answer people's emails. It rubs out my social life, but I will answer people's emails, and I'm very easy to find.
I think it's really impressive. I think you're such a great spokesperson for the movement as well. And you know, as I say, I felt really honoured that you would take the time to kind of talk to us. And you know, I think I just love the idea that without spending money, we can all improve our health outcomes, and you don't need to do an awful lot. So, you know, I mean, I'm here with the sun beating down on my back because of your research. I know that I've got photons which are zooming through me, a lot of them stopping on their way through, and my mitochondria are probably thanking me. So, I mean, I'd love to. if you could tell me someone who could help explain mitochondrial function really simply as well, I'd love that. I bought Nick Lane's book Transformer about a year ago, and I started reading it, and I was like, wow, I need a different brain.
Nick is a tour de force. He's a great writer. Power, Sex and Suicide, the story of mitochondria, is great. Some of his books, like Transformer, even for an academic, a bit like stirring cement with your eyelashes, but it's great stuff.
I love, well, look, I think it's the idea that we have these tiny things in each one of our cells, which, powers us forward. I think it's almost magical, isn't it? I think it's incredible. But anyway, thank you so much. I mean, I think, one of my thoughts is actually to start building a winter sun toolkit. So, obviously we've got Shadowmap, which enables people to go and have a look at places in the sun, but be nice to think that we could kind of layer in some other bits and pieces. So I might come to you for some advice in terms of lighting and things. We could actually do a link to Battersea Dogs Home so people could get dogs as well.
Yeah, well, I'm always here, happy to respond, and always great to talk.
Thank you so much.